The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with worried voices. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in their floating pods, all facing the central holographic display. The image showed a dark mass of ships moving through space like a cloud of locusts, consuming everything in their path. "The Dark Swarm has destroyed 3 more trading posts," announced Council Leader Ross, his gray skin reflecting the red emergency lights. "Their fleet grows larger with each passing day." In the upper rows, Ambassador Green from Earth watched quietly. He was the newest member of the Council, representing humanity's first steps into galactic politics. Unlike the other aliens who stood 8 or 9 feet tall, he looked small in his pod, but his eyes stayed fixed on the tactical display, studying every detail. "We must gather our forces," shouted one of the alien representatives, their voice booming through the translator systems. "The combined fleet must strike back." Council Leader Ross raised his hand for silence. "Our largest ships are already moving to defend our borders. The Dark Swarm will learn to fear our might." Ambassador Green pressed the button to speak. A small light blinked above his pod. "Earth would like to offer our fleet to help in this fight." The chamber went quiet for a moment. Then, to his surprise, several representatives started laughing. "The human ships," one of them asked. "Those tiny vessels you call warships." Green stood straighter. "Our ships may be smaller, but they're fast and well-armed. We've developed new tactics that—" "Your largest ship is barely longer than my personal yacht," interrupted another representative. "What can such small ships do against the Dark Swarm? Their vessels are the size of small moons." Back on Earth, Admiral James Walker stood in the control room of the Space Force Command, reading the Council's official response to their offer of help. The message was polite but firm. "While we appreciate Earth's willingness to assist, this conflict requires ships of significant size and power. Your vessels would only be at risk." Walker placed the tablet down and looked through the massive window at the fleet in orbit. 30 ships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. They might be small compared to alien vessels, but they were packed with the latest technology. More importantly, they were crewed by people who knew how to think outside the box. "They rejected our help, sir?" asked Captain Robert Stone, commander of the HMS Thunder. "They did," Walker replied, a small smile forming on his face. "They think our ships are too small to be useful." Stone walked to the window, watching as the HMS Lightning practiced combat maneuvers. The ship spun and weaved through a field of practice drones with incredible speed. "They don't understand what we can do they?" "No, they don't." Walker turned to face the tactical display, showing the Dark Swarm's advance. "But they might learn soon enough." In his office, Walker opened a secure channel to all ship captains. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Council has rejected our offer to help. They think we're too small to make a difference." He paused, letting that sink in. "But we all know that size isn't everything. Begin Operation Wasp's Nest. I want all ships ready to move within 24 hours." The responses came back quickly. Every captain acknowledged the order. They had trained for this, prepared for this. While the Council's massive ships took days to power up and move, the human fleet could be ready in hours. As Walker watched the preparations through his window, he thought about Earth's history. How many times had people underestimated something because of its size? How many battles had been won by smaller forces using better tactics? "Sir," his computer announced, "new reports from the frontier. The Dark Swarm has broken through the Council's defensive line. Their ships were too slow to respond." Walker nodded, just as he had expected. The Council's huge ships were powerful, but they were like giants trying to swat flies. The Dark Swarm was using its numbers to overwhelm them. "Send a message to all ships," he ordered. "The Council might not want our help, but we're going anyway. Sometimes the best way to prove yourself is to act, not talk." As the sun set over the command center, Earth's tiny fleet prepared for war. They might be small, but they were about to show the galaxy that humanity had learned long ago that the clever mouse can make the elephant dance. The stars waited, and soon they would witness just what humanity's small ships could do. The HMS Thunder cut through space like a silver arrow. At 300 meters long, it was tiny compared to the massive alien ships around it, but its size hid its true power. Admiral Walker stood on the bridge, watching through the main screen as his fleet moved into position near the edge of Council space. "Status report," Walker called out to his crew. "All systems ready, sir," replied Captain Stone from his command chair. "The new stealth coding is working perfectly. Enemy sensors will have trouble spotting us." Walker smiled as he looked at the tactical display. His 30 ships might be small, but each one carried technology that would surprise their alien friends. The Thunder, like all human ships, was built with one key idea. Being small meant being hard to hit. In the distance, a Council battleship passed by. It was huge, over 3 kilometers long. Its shadow could have covered Walker's entire fleet. But as Walker watched it move, he noticed how slowly it turned, how much time it took to change direction. "Like watching a whale trying to catch minnows," Stone muttered, and several bridge crew members smiled. The human ships had something special that the aliens hadn't figured out yet. Each vessel carried what they called the hive mind system, a network that let the ships work together like a swarm of bees. When one ship spotted danger, all ships knew about it instantly. "Admiral," called out the sensor officer, "we're picking up distress signals. The dark swarm is attacking 3 systems at once." Walker watched as the massive Council ships tried to respond. They were powerful, yes, but they moved so slowly, like giant trees trying to walk. They needed hours just to get their engines ready for a jump. "Show me our ship status," Walker ordered. The display lit up, showing all 30 ships of the human fleet. Each one was different, designed for a special job. The HMS Lightning, fastest ship in the fleet, perfect for scouting. The HMS Hornet, packed with the newest weapons Earth had developed. The HMS Mosquito, built to slip past enemy shields and cause chaos. And the HMS Firefly, their best stealth ship, invisible to most sensors. "Sir," Stone said, standing up from his chair, "the Council ships are asking for help. They can't reach all 3 systems in time." Walker nodded. This was their chance. "Send the message to all ships. Operation Wasp's Nest begins now." The human fleet split into 3 groups of 10 ships each. While the Council's giant ships were still warming up their engines, the human vessels jumped into action. Their small fusion drives needed only minutes to power up, and their advanced computers could plot safe jumps almost instantly. "Look at that," said Stone, pointing to the screen. A Council battleship was still turning around while 3 human ships had already jumped to their target. The bridge crew watched their displays as the plan unfolded. Each group of human ships would arrive at their target well before any Council help could come. They would face the dark swarm alone, but that was exactly what Walker wanted. "Remember, everyone," Walker announced to the fleet, "we're small but we're smart. Use the tactics we practiced. Don't let them pin you down. Move fast, hit hard, and work together." As the Thunder prepared to jump, Walker thought about all the times in human history when the smaller force had won. The Council thought size meant strength. They built bigger and bigger ships, thinking that was the answer. But humans had learned different lessons from their past. "All ships report ready," Stone announced. "Jump coordinates locked in." Walker looked one last time at the slow-moving Council ships. Soon, they would learn that they had made a big mistake by judging Earth's fleet by its size. "Start the jump sequence," Walker ordered. "Let's show them what these tiny ships can do." The HMS Thunder and its sister ships vanished into jump space, leaving the huge Council vessels behind. They were heading toward battle, ready to prove that sometimes the smallest dog in the fight could be the most dangerous. As they jumped, Walker remembered an old saying from Earth: "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog." The Dark Swarm was about to learn this lesson the hard way. The colony world of New Hope didn't live up to its name today. Dark Swarm ships filled the sky, their black hulls blocking out the stars. Between the planet and its attackers lay a dense asteroid field, making it impossible for the Council's huge battleships to help. "Perfect," Admiral Walker said, watching from the HMS Thunder's bridge as his 10 ships emerged from jump space. "Just perfect." The Dark Swarm hadn't spotted them yet. Their ships, each one bigger than a small city, were focused on breaking through the colony's weak defenses. They didn't notice the tiny human vessels slipping between the asteroids like fish through coral. "All ships, activate WASP protocol," Walker ordered. "Form up into attack pairs." Captain Stone stood at his station, watching the tactical display as the human ships split into teams of 2. "They still haven't seen us, sir. Their sensors are looking for big ships, not small ones." Walker smiled. This was exactly what they had trained for. While the Council built massive ships that had to go around asteroid fields, human ships could go through them. While the Dark Swarm looked for giant energy signatures, the human fleet's small reactors barely showed up on sensors. "HMS Hornet reports ready," the comm officer announced. "HMS Lightning and Mosquito in position. All ships awaiting your command." Through the main screen, Walker watched a Dark Swarm destroyer turn its weapons on the colony. It was time to show them their mistake. "Execute attack pattern Delta," Walker ordered. "Let's show them what these tiny ships can do." The human fleet burst into action. The HMS Lightning and Mosquito shot forward, weaving through the asteroids at speeds that would have torn larger ships apart. They looked like bright streaks against the darkness of space. The Dark Swarm finally noticed them, but it was too late. By the time their huge guns turned to fire, the human ships had already slipped past their defenses. "Now," Walker commanded. The HMS Hornet fired its new weapon, the Stinger missile. It wasn't very big, but it didn't need to be. The missile split into hundreds of smaller ones, each one finding a weak spot in the Dark Swarm ship's armor. "Direct hits," Stone reported. "Their shields are failing." The Dark Swarm ship tried to turn, tried to bring its weapons to bear on the tiny attackers. But it was like watching an elephant try to catch a mouse. The human ships were too fast, too agile. "Second wave, begin your attack runs," Walker ordered. More human ships darted in, firing their weapons with perfect accuracy. They moved like a swarm of angry bees, striking from all directions. The Dark Swarm's massive ships couldn't keep up. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "3 Dark Swarm ships are turning to run." Walker watched as the enemy fleet started to break apart. They had never faced anything like this before. Their huge weapons were useless against targets too small and fast to hit. "They're sending out a distress call," Stone reported, listening to the enemy communications. They're calling us demons. Say we're too small to fight fairly." The bridge crew laughed. After being called too small to help, it felt good to prove them wrong. "Sir," the comm officer interrupted, "we're getting a message from the Council ships. They want to know what's happening. They're still trying to find a safe route through the asteroids." Walker shook his head. By the time those giant ships arrived, the battle would be long over. "Tell them the situation is under control. The tiny human fleet has things well in hand." The last Dark Swarm ship turned to retreat, its massive hull scared by hundreds of precise hits from the human weapons. They had learned an important lesson today. Sometimes the smallest enemy could be the deadliest. "All ships, report status," Walker called out. One by one, the human ships checked in. Thanks to their size and speed, none had taken serious damage. The colony was safe, and the mighty Dark Swarm had run from ships they could barely see. "Send word to Earth," Walker ordered. "Tell them Operation Wasp's Nest was a complete success." He looked at the battlefield, where the giant Dark Swarm ships were limping away. "And make sure to mention that size isn't everything." The stars twinkled through the asteroid field, watching as humanity's tiny fleet proved that the biggest ships don't always win the fight. The Council's emergency meeting chamber was in chaos. The massive hologram in the center showed footage from the battle at New Hope Colony. Alien representatives watched in amazement as human ships, looking like tiny dots, took down dark swarm vessels many times their size. "Impossible," shouted one council member. "Those little ships should have been destroyed." Admiral Walker stood calmly in the center of the chamber, his small human frame dwarfed by the alien leaders around him. "Size isn't everything," he said simply. "And we haven't even shown you our best tricks yet." Council Leader Ross leaned forward in his floating pod. "What do you mean, Admiral?" "Permission to demonstrate the full WASP protocol," Walker asked, a slight smile on his face. After a moment of discussion, the Council agreed. Walker touched his command tablet, sending orders to the human fleet waiting outside. The main hologram shifted to show real-time footage of space around the Council station. "Watch carefully," Walker said. "You thought our ships were too small to be useful. Now see what they can really do." The HMS Thunder appeared first, followed by 5 other human ships. They looked tiny compared to the Council station, like insects next to a mountain. But then something incredible happened. "WASP protocol, full activation," Walker commanded. The human ships began to move in perfect sync. They flew in tight formations, their movements so precise it looked like they were connected by invisible strings. Energy fields stretched between them, linking their shields together. "One small ship might be weak," Walker explained, "but together, they become something else entirely." The Council members watched in silence as the human ships demonstrated their true power. When they moved together, their combined shields were stronger than any single large ship. When they attacked together, their weapons reinforced each other, creating effects no one had seen before. "This is the real strength of our fleet," Walker continued. "We don't need massive ships. We learned long ago that a swarm working together can take down any giant." On the main screen, the human ships split into pairs, then came together again, moving like dancers in a complicated performance. Each movement was perfect, calculated by advanced computers that let the ships think and act as one. "Incredible," whispered Council Leader Ross. "Your ships move like they share one mind." "In a way they do," Walker replied. "We call it the hive mind system. Every ship knows what the others are doing. They work together, think together, fight together." The demonstration continued. The human ships showed how they could create shields together that no single weapon could break. They revealed how their combined sensors could spot things no single ship could detect. They proved that their synchronized weapons could hit targets that would be impossible for one ship alone. "And this," Walker said with pride, "is why the Dark Swarm ran from our tiny fleet. They weren't fighting small ships. They were fighting parts of a larger whole." The Council chamber was quiet now. The alien representatives who had laughed at Earth's small ships weren't laughing anymore. "We've received reports," Council Leader Ross announced, "that the Dark Swarm is pulling back from 3 more sectors. They're afraid of encountering your fleet again." Walker nodded. "They should be. Every time they destroy one of their huge ships, they lose a massive amount of resources. But our ships, we can build 3 new ones for the cost of repairing one of theirs." The hologram showed the human ships finishing their demonstration, coming together one last time in a perfect formation. They might be small, but together they were more powerful than any single massive vessel. "The Council owes humanity an apology," Ross declared. "We were wrong to judge your fleet by its size. Will you teach our forces your tactics?" Walker smiled. "That's why I'm here. The Dark Swarm thinks bigger is better. Let's show them how wrong they are." As the Council members discussed this new development, Walker watched his ships through the hologram. They had proved what he knew all along, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in building bigger ships, but in finding smarter ways to fight. The tiny fleet had changed everything. Now the real war could begin. The training room aboard the Council's main station was packed with alien officers. All eyes were fixed on Admiral Walker as he stood next to a holographic display of the latest battle formations. "The key is not to think of your ships as separate units," Walker explained, pointing to the display. "Think of them as parts of a whole, like fingers on a hand." In space nearby, the first joint training exercise was underway. Human ships flew alongside smaller versions of Council vessels, teaching them the art of pack hunting. The aliens had finally learned their lesson. They were building smaller, faster ships based on human designs. "Look," Captain Stone said from his position on the HMS Thunder's bridge. "The Council ships are actually keeping up with us now." Walker watched with pride as alien crews practiced the WASP protocol. It hadn't been easy to convince them to change their ways. But after watching human ships destroy 10 more Dark Swarm vessels without losing a single ship, even the most stubborn Council members had to admit that the human way worked better. "Admiral," called out a young communication officer, "we're getting reports from the front. The Dark Swarm is pulling back from the Centauri sector." The news spread quickly through the station. The Dark Swarm, once thought unstoppable, was retreating. Their massive ships, once seen as invincible, were now being hunted by packs of smaller vessels using human tactics. "Show me," Walker ordered. The main display changed to show the latest battle. A group of human ships, working together with newly trained Council vessels, surrounded a massive Dark Swarm battleship. The smaller ships moved like wolves around a bear, striking quickly and darting away before the huge guns could target them. "Beautiful," muttered an alien admiral watching nearby. "Simply beautiful." The human ships led the attack, showing their alien allies where to hit and when to strike. The Dark Swarm ships' massive weapons were useless against targets that moved too fast to track. Its thick armor meant nothing when the smaller ships focused their fire on single weak points. "They're learning well," Stone said, watching the Council ships copy human maneuvers. "Who would have thought we'd be teaching battle tactics to species that have been in space for thousands of years?" Walker smiled, remembering how these same aliens had laughed at Earth's tiny fleet just months ago. Now they eagerly studied every detail of human ship design and combat doctrine. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "the Dark Swarm ship is breaking up. 0 casualties on our side." The training room erupted in cheers. Another victory, another proof that size wasn't everything. The Dark Swarm's huge ships were becoming their weakness, not their strength. "Admiral Walker," Council Leader Ross's voice came over the comm. "The Council has finished voting. Your promotion to Supreme Fleet Commander has been approved. All combined forces will now follow human combat doctrine." This was a bigger victory than any battle. The Council, which had existed for thousands of years, was now accepting human leadership in military matters, all because they had learned to look past size and see true strength. "Thank you," Walker replied. "Now let's talk about the next phase of our plan." The holographic display changed to show the Dark Swarm's home systems. Their massive ships were gathering there, preparing for a final stand. But they were fighting yesterday's war, still believing that bigger meant better. "They think they're safe behind their walls of giant ships," Walker told the assembled officers. "But they haven't learned what you have. In space combat, speed beats size. Teamwork beats power. And a swarm of small ships, working together, can bring down any giant." The alien officers nodded. They had seen the proof with their own eyes. Their own smaller ships were already proving more effective than their massive battleships ever were. "The Dark Swarm call us tiny," Walker continued. "They laughed at our small ships. Now, they run when they see us coming. And soon, we'll show them the full power of what they mocked." As the training continued, Walker watched human and alien ships flying together in perfect formation. The galaxy was changing, all because humanity had shown that the smallest fleet could be the deadliest. The final battle was coming, and size wouldn't matter at all. Supreme Commander Walker stood on the bridge of the HMS Thunder, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history gathered around him. Hundreds of ships, most of them now built to human specifications, formed up in attack groups. The Council had learned its lesson well. Status report, Walker called out to his command staff. All ships report ready, Captain Stone replied. The Council ships have fully adapted to the WASP protocol. Our joint training shows 95% efficiency. The main screen showed their target, the Dark Swarm's main production facility. It was defended by 50 of their largest ships, each one the size of a small moon. Once, such a sight would have terrified the Council. Now, they saw it differently. Look how they bunched together, Stone said, pointing to the enemy formation. They still think big ships in big groups are the answer. Walker nodded. They never learned. Time to show them their mistake. All ships begin Operation Firefly. The combined fleet split into smaller groups, just as they had practiced. Human ships led each formation, showing their allies exactly how to move, when to strike. The Dark Swarm's massive sensors detected them coming, but that didn't matter anymore. They're powering up their main weapons, reported the sensor officer. Their ships are trying to form a defensive wall. Perfect, Walker said. Just like we expected. Launch the first wave. The smallest ships in the fleet, led by the HMS Firefly, shot forward. They looked like sparks against the darkness of space, too small for the Dark Swarm's huge guns to target effectively. While the enemy focused on these tiny targets, the rest of the fleet moved into position. Firefly Group reports ready, Stone announced. They've mapped all the weak points in the enemy defense. Walker keyed his comm. All ships, execute Maneuver Delta. Show them why humanity's tactics work. The battle exploded into action. Small ships darted between the massive Dark Swarm vessels, like fish swimming between the legs of waiting birds. The enemy's huge weapons fired again and again, but hit nothing but empty space. First strike successful, called out the weapons officer. 3 Dark Swarm ships disabled. The human strategy was working perfectly. While the small ships distracted the enemy, larger vessels moved in close, targeting specific weak points that the scouts had found. The Dark Swarm's giant ships were powerful, but they could only fire in one direction at a time. The smaller ships attacked from all sides at once. They're trying to regroup, Stone reported, watching the enemy movements. Their formations are falling apart. Walker smiled. Time for the killing blow. All ships, execute the Hornet's sting. This was humanity's master stroke, a battle plan that used the enemy size against them. Small ships darted in close, too close for the huge weapons to target. Larger ships provided covering fire, while specialized vessels struck at engines and weapon systems. Sir, the sensor officer shouted, the Dark Swarm flagship is launching fighters. Too late, Walker replied calmly. They should have done that at the start. He was right. The Dark Swarm fighters were as oversized and clumsy as their capital ships. They were easy targets for the swift, agile vessels of the combined fleet. Production facilities' shields are failing, Stone reported. The Dark Swarm fleet is in chaos. They can't coordinate their defense against so many small targets. Walker watched as the mighty Dark Swarm ships, once the terror of the galaxy, fell one by one to the swarm of smaller vessels. Their huge weapons fired uselessly at targets too quick to hit. Their thick armor meant nothing when dozens of ships focused fire on the same spot. Sir, the comm officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the Dark Swarm command. They're offering to surrender. The bridge fell silent. The Dark Swarm, who had never lost a battle before meeting humanity, were giving up. Tell them we accept, Walker ordered. And remind them, this is what happens when you underestimate someone based on their size. As the Dark Swarm ships powered down their weapons, Walker looked at his fleet. Humanity's tiny ships had changed the face of space warfare forever. They had proven that bigger wasn't always better. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after the Dark Swarm surrender, The Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked very different. Where once massive alien ships had dominated the space outside its windows, now hundreds of smaller vessels moved with grace and purpose. The change could be seen everywhere, in the ships, in the tactics, and in the attitudes of the council members themselves. Admiral Walker, now Supreme Commander of the Combined Galactic Fleet, stood at the center of the hall. Around him, the council members had gathered for a special ceremony. 1 year ago, Council Leader Ross began, "We made the mistake of judging Earth's fleet by its size. Today, we gather to acknowledge how wrong we were and how much we have learned." The main display showed images from the past year. Huge dark swarm ships being dismantled, their materials used to build smaller, more efficient vessels. Council shipyards now produced ships based on human designs. The giant warships of the past were being retired, replaced by faster, more agile craft. "The statistics speak for themselves," Ross continued. "Our new ships cost less to build, require smaller crews, and are 10 times more effective in combat. All because humanity showed us a better way." Walker looked at Captain Stone, who stood beside him. They both remembered the day when the Council had laughed at Earth's tiny fleet. Now, those same council members competed to have human officers train their crews. "Supreme Commander Walker," Ross announced, "the Council has unanimously voted to make Earth's combat doctrine the standard for all galactic forces. Furthermore, the Human Space Force Academy will become the primary training center for all fleet officers." The hall erupted in applause. It was the final victory, not just winning the war, but changing how the entire galaxy thought about space combat. "Thank you," Walker said as he stepped forward to speak. "But remember, our success wasn't just about having smaller ships. It was about working together, about turning our apparent weakness into strength." The main screen changed to show the new combined fleet in action. Ships of various sizes, all built using human principles, moved together in perfect harmony. The WASP protocol had evolved, incorporating ideas from all species to become even more effective. 1 year ago, the Dark Swarm thought size meant power, Walker continued. They built bigger and bigger ships, thinking that would make them invincible, but they forgot something important. In space, speed and teamwork matter more than size. The council members nodded. They had learned this lesson well. Their own fleets now trained in human-style pack tactics, using coordinated attacks instead of relying on massive weapons. "Sir," Stone whispered to Walker, "look outside." Through the great windows of the hall, a special demonstration began. The HMS Thunder led a formation of ships from 20 different species. They moved as one, their energy fields linking together, their movements perfectly synchronized. It was humanity's gift to the galaxy, the art of fighting smart instead of big. "The Dark Swarm called us tiny," Walker said, watching the display. "They laughed at our small ships. But size isn't everything. A swarm of bees can take down the mightiest bear. A pack of wolves can bring down the largest prey. And a fleet of small ships, working together, can change the galaxy." Council Leader Ross stepped forward again. "Let this be a lesson to all of us. Never judge by size alone. Earth's tiny fleet did more than win a war. It opened our eyes to a better way of thinking." The ceremony concluded with a final display of the new tactics. Ships of all species, once divided by their different philosophies of warfare, now flew together in formations that would have been impossible a year ago. The Dark Swarm's threat had brought them together, but humanity's wisdom had made them stronger. As Walker watched the demonstration, he thought about how far they had come. From being mocked for their small ships to becoming the teachers of the galaxy, it was proof that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest beginnings. "They called us tiny," Walker said quietly. "Now they call us teacher." The stars shone bright outside the council hall, watching as the galaxy's fleet danced among them, moving like a swarm of fireflies in the night. Size had stopped mattering. Skill, speed, and teamwork had won the day. The tiny fleet had changed everything, forever.